Hello everyone. Welcome to my video on Thomas Jefferson and the Danbury Baptist Association. Now our assignment this week was to choose one Christian denomination, sub-denomination, or tradition and discuss its impact on American history. And I chose the Danbury Baptist Association just because of their impact. Now I know most of you don't know who the Danbury Baptist Association is, but I bet you know the repercussions of one simple letter. Now, to start off with, Danbury is a small town in Connecticut, located roughly about 50 miles northeast of New York City. Now, shortly after its inception, all the way through the Revolutionary War and beyond, the Connecticut colony was governed basically by an elite group of wealthy families. In 1639, they set up the fundamental orders in which that's how the colony would be governed, and it continued on. Now, this included the Standing Order, which basically covered every aspect of life in Connecticut and how it was controlled by this elite group of intellectuals, politicians, and religious leaders. Now, the established church at the time was Congregationalism, and many of the politicians were members of the Congregational Church. And even Yale College was created and run by the Congregational Church, which produced the intellectuals and the ministers who would, in turn, take over these political offices. So there's huge interconnection between social standing, religious life, and political life, all of these different things which led to basically control and power of Connecticut. Now, these actions left a great many people marginalized by their government. You know, if a candidate decided to run that wasn't a member of the Congregational Church, their name was placed at the very bottom of the ballot, and they never made it into office. Starting in the 1790s, things began to change. Now, the people who were in power, these wealthy families of the Congregational Church, were Federalists. Now, this new group of people who were pushing against how the old regime was doing things were Republicans. And many of these were other denominations, such as Episcopals, Unitarians, and of course, Baptists. Now, traditionally, Baptists supported the separation of church and state. They believed that no political ruler, be it a king, elected official, appointed person, should come between man and God. And the Danbury Baptist Association was a strong believer in this. Organized in 1790, the Danbury Baptist Association was a group of 26 different Baptist churches throughout the western part of Connecticut and New York. They were a religious and political minority, but they were thrilled when a fellow Republican, Thomas Jefferson, was elected President of the United States in 1801. In October of that year, they wrote a letter congratulating Jefferson on his presidential victory and inauguration. In their letter, they reaffirmed their support of religious freedom, which they saw as an inalienable right granted by God. As one of the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson spent almost 5 decades in public service, between serving in his beloved home of Virginia to becoming the 3rd president of the United States. And when he ran for president, it was one of the most contentious elections to date. And one of the reasons was the fact that while Jefferson believed in religious freedom, he really didn't have a set faith beyond Christianity that he followed. He didn't have a denomination that he was linked with. And this became a very hard thing for many people to accept. But he was very much a person who believed in religious freedom. Beyond serving as a member of the Continental Congress, he also served as governor of Virginia, Secretary of the State, Vice President, and of course, as the 3rd President of the United States. He's also known as an accomplished lawyer, writer, and architect. He wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. Now, as previously said, the Danbury Baptist Association's letter written in 1801 did congratulate Jefferson on his win and told him, basically in no uncertain terms, that life in Connecticut did not meet the Republicans' ideals of religious freedom. He told them about how they were not only the religious but the political minority. Jefferson wrote back to them, and his response is still felt today. While Jefferson wrote several drafts of the letter, the final one sent to the Danbury Baptist Association included this line: "I contemplate with sovereign reverence the act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state." It's this statement of putting a wall between church and state that ended up becoming a very synonymous statement in American history. And we actually do have many different court cases that the Supreme Court took up using the line wall of separation between church and state. And they include the following. There are 5 major cases: Reynolds versus the United States in 1879, Emerson versus the Board of Education, 1947, McCollum versus the Board of Education, 1948, Engel versus Vitale, 1962, and Lemon versus Kurtzman in 1971. Each of these used the statement, a wall of separation between church and state. Many historians have discussed not only whether or not Jefferson's statement is one that should still be used or whether it should be disregarded. In the final case of Lemon versus Kurtzman, that's when the Supreme Court started to question why they were using a letter to discuss the Constitution and not looking at the Constitution itself. This continues on even until today, how people really do try to stop church and state from intermingling. If we look at just this one group of Baptists who believed without a doubt that church should be the church and the government should be the government should not have control over the church, nor should the church have control over the government, that there shouldn't be a state-sponsored government, has now led to what we have today as a separation between the two. And it all started with a letter and a response. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.